Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to be exploring XGen. XGen is a system to generate primitives and pretty much a lot of variation from in a very easy way. It's something called, I believe, procedural modeling, where you can use functions and calculations and a little bit of math to get a lot of instances of certain objects in order to create a lot of things. Like I've seen people do special effects with XGen. Hair is very common, grass. There's a lot of things that you can do with XGen. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to go up here into Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and make sure that XGen is turned on in your scene. I normally turn it off because it takes a little while to load, about 10 seconds or so. And if you leave it on, every time you open Maya, it's going to load it and it's going to take 10 extra seconds to load. So if I'm not using it, I prefer not to have it here. And in this video, I'm going to show you the basis or the process that we're going to be using to create all the haircuts. I'm going to do one example right here. I'm going to show you all the different tools that we have available for us. And then I'm going to do all of the haircuts that we need, because as you can see, these are a lot of haircuts. We had, I believe, 12 or 13 haircuts that we need to do, which are quite a bit. So if I record the whole process, it's going to be really difficult. However, don't worry, the files for all the haircuts with all the modifiers and everything are going to be in our project files, so you will be able to come in and check if I did any weird stuff on the modifiers. I'll probably won't do anything super fancy, so just follow along on this first one and then repeat the same process just by changing some of the modifiers for the rest of them. And with that said, let's get going. So I'm gonna start with a plane here. Now this plane is where the hair is gonna grow from, okay? And one of the important things that we need to do for the hair is we actually need to mimic the curvature of the scalp of the head that we have. If we were to grow the hair in this way, all the strands would be very straight, and the shadows that each strand projects on top of the other ones, on the ones behind it, will be very flat. So the first thing you need to do is you're gonna move this in such a way that's roughly about 25 degrees rotated towards us. Now you can also change the distance here, like make it a little bit more like a rectangle. That's fine. It's not a big deal because we're going to be changing some of this stuff. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be very insistent about is you need to make sure that all your naming conventions are perfectly fine. Like they need to be perfect, because if you mess up the names, XGen messes up and freaks out completely and doesn't know what to do. So once you have this here, I'm just going to delete this, delete history, center pivot. I'm gonna duplicate it and have this as a backup, just to have several of them ready at the time I need it. Let's hide this. And this one is gonna be my first one. So I'm gonna call this hair long. Yeah, just hair long. I think that's fine. What's the name that we gave it? Main long. Okay. So let's call this main hair underscore long. Perfect. So that's a good name for this card. I'm gonna go into XGen again, and I'm gonna go into my XGen menu right here. And I'm gonna create a new description. A description is pretty much the actual modifiers and the actual elements that I'm gonna be using for XGen for this particular geometry. And all the descriptions live inside something called a collection. So the thing you need to do here is this one should inherit the name. So I'm gonna call this main hair long desk, so I know that that's the description. And this one's gonna be soldier hair collection. So all the descriptions that I'm gonna be doing, the 12 or 13 descriptions that I'm gonna need, are gonna be here in the soldier hair collection. Okay. Now we're gonna select splines. We're gonna be using splines to modify this element. We're gonna generate the primitives randomly across the surface, and the only thing you need to change besides the names is this one right here. You're gonna place and shape the guides, and you're gonna say create. With that done, this is gonna happen now. You're gonna see that the plane changes into those little like what's it called, little crosses there. And there's gonna be no hair, and the reason there's no hair is because we actually have no guides. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create the guides. So I'm gonna go up here into this add or move guides button, and I'm just gonna press, or I'm gonna position 3 guides in my element. Okay, there we go. Now if I press this little I button, you're gonna see that boom, there's hair everywhere near those guides, which looks really good. The next thing we need to do is we need to modify those guides. So I'm gonna go into my Q button. I'm gonna select my guide here. So this gets a little bit difficult to. I'm gonna select all of the guides actually, and with my R key, I'm just gonna scale it up. so it's long. Now when I update this, boom, look at that. We got a lot of strands of hair going all the way to the top, and they are occupying a very nice space all throughout that element right there. If you want to, you can add more guides. However, to be honest, 3 is usually the minimum that you need. And in our case, since our hair is actually very simple, it's pretty much straight, we're going to give the curvature with the cards rather than with the texture. So in this case, we really don't want to have a lot of variations here. Now, however, if you do want to have a little bit of variation, you can go into the guide control points right here and move them a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to give it a little bit of variation to the hair. Again, I think we can get this variation with other methods. So I usually don't like to give it a lot of change, especially not on this one, since these ones are going to be like the main hairs. But if you want to, and you want to have just a little bit of extra movement here or there, you're welcome to play around with it. Just make sure that you don't have any extreme silhouette here on the sides, because that's going to be wasted space, and try to keep everything here on the middle. There we go. So see that works fine. Cool. So now what we need to do is I need to modify a couple of the things here so that these hairs look a little bit better, because right now they're pretty much just tubes, right? They're being generated here at the plane, and they're going all the way to the top until they hit this tip, which is also very flat, very ugly. So the first thing you can do is modify the density of the elements, and this is important. The density of the hairs that we normally have, and this is something I had to Google. You can Google it real quick. You can go hair density per inch. An inch is about 3 centimeters. So it says here you roughly have 2,200 strands of hair per square inch. That's the average that every person has. And this is very important because one common mistake is either making hair super thin or making it super thick and having very few strands. So I can't really count how many strands I have here, but I can assure you that's not 2,000, right? And I'm roughly working with that with 1 square inch. So I'm going to increase the density quite a bit. Let's go to like a 5 there. So that's quite more hair density, which I think is fine. And now we need to play with the width of the actual hair right here. This is because normally the hair is in this case, it's very constant. It's going all the way from the bottom to the top in a cylinder shape. And I want to change that. So there's this thing here called the width ramp. And this is pretty much like the profile of the curve. And the way you want to have it is you want to have it sort of like a kind of teardrop shape. Like you want to start with a very thin hair and then go wide and then thin again, like that. If you've seen commercials of how hair looks, that's roughly the way it looks. And the reason why that's going to work, or what that's going to be a good idea, is because we're going to have a cleaner transition down here. So I'm going to grab this little point right here and going to lower it. So we get this very thin line here where the hair is born, like that. And then I'm going to insert one more point here to get the body of the actual hair, like the roots of the hair. If you get one extra point there, just click this thing and it'll go away. And then the tip also should go down like this. I'm going to add one more here to keep a little bit of thickness. Like I don't want the hair to be super thin. So that should be good. Click here. If at any point this disappears, just click this thing here. Also, I'm going to select all the guides and go here and say bake guide vertex, so that it becomes kind of like permanent. And now one more thing you can do here is you can go to each of these ones and change this from linear to smooth. And this one from linear, sorry, to spline, not smooth, spline. And what that's going to do is going to soften the element, and it should give you a little bit of a cleaner element. Now, one thing that you're going to notice, especially in a couple of moments when we start playing with the different modifiers, is that the amount of divisions that each of these tubes has could be slightly offset, or it could be slightly low. So you can modify how many points you have by changing this. If I change this to like 10, the hair is going to be even softer on those transitions because it has more divisions to work with, which is really, really good for us. I'm going to show you here well, let me save this real quick. Let's go to our soldiers. Yeah, there we go. So here it is, hair setup. I'm actually going to save on top of that one. That's an old file. And I'm going to turn on a couple of things to make sure that I can appreciate the best possible way how this hair is looking. So I'm going to go into lightning here in rendering. I'm going to create a directional light. I'm going to press number 7, and I'm going to position this directional light so that it's shading towards our hair. Let's move it out of the way so that we don't have anything to do there. I'm going to turn shadows on. There we go. That allows me to see the shadows of the hair. I'm going to turn on anti-aliasing. This is important because otherwise since there's so many hair, it looks really weird, and it's a little bit difficult to see what's going on. Now, one thing I'm noticing here is that even though the hair looks really good, it's way too thick. I want to be able to see a little bit of the hairs in between all of the other hairs. So I'm going to go here into my width channel, and I'm going to lower it to like a 0.05. That's a very good number because you can see that we have some sort of inner penetration there. Like we can actually see through the hair, and it makes for a very nice distribution there. So maybe a little bit less, 0.03. No, that's way too thin. That seems like a very thin hair. So 0.05 I think was okay. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. So now we have our proper splines. We have our proper amount of hair. You can see that that's quite a bit of hair. That's probably what we would expect to see in someone's head. And now it's time to work with modifiers. And modifiers are pretty cool because they're again, mathematic things that make changes to our splines without us actually having to go in there and make modifications. So I'm going to go right here, and the first thing I'm going to add is a little bit of clumping. Clumping is something that happens in pretty much every hair. Like hairs are never like completely straight. They tend to clump towards each other, and this is a very good way to give a little bit of clumping. So I'm going to add a clumping here. And the first thing you're going to notice is that we get an error here saying like, hey, I don't really know how to create this clumping. And that's because we need to create a map here, like in the, where is it? In the clump effect here, we need to give it a map. So we're going to go, in this, we're going to create a map, and we're going to say clump create. And we're going to paint where we want the clump to happen. So in this case, it's all white, so that's fine. So the clumping is going to happen everywhere. Now, if we increase the clump variance right here, we need to save this. So there we go. If we increase the variance here, we should get, oh no, we're not getting it. Sorry. I messed this up here. So let me get rid of this, reset to slider. There we go. Where is it? Okay, here it is. So I'm gonna go all the way down here into the setup maps. That was a different map that we're gonna be using later. And in here, we're gonna say, give me just a variant map everywhere. So I'm just gonna say generate here, and you can see that we get all of those little yellow lines there. I'm gonna save this, and now what's gonna happen is that the hair is gonna start clumping on those specific points. See that? See how we get a nice little clumping there? Let's get the clump variance back to 0, and it should be more easy to see. There we go. Let's increase this quite heavily. Let's see if we can go to like a 10. No, it breaks after 10. So let's keep it at 1. But yeah, you can see how hair is now clumping into like different strands, and this is going to be very useful for us for two reasons. One, it's going to allow us to see a little bit more of what is outside of this element, and two, it's going to give us a very nice variation. Some of these strands are going to be thinner, some are going to be thicker, and that's going to give us this kind of element here. Now, this actual clumping that you're seeing here into like little spikes, that's going to be modeled. That's not something that we can actually control here. We could, but it's not the ideal thing. Because it makes it so that the texture is more difficult to manage later on. So don't worry about that. We just need to give a little bit of clumping here. I do want a little bit of clump variance. So let's say like a 10. Oh no, I don't want that. So the clump variance, what it's doing is like clumping on certain areas and then not clumping everywhere else. And that's not exactly what I'm going for. So let's go back here. Okay, let's update there so that we get the proper element. Cool. Now let's see the next modifier. The next modifier is one that's very nice, and it's the cut modifier. The cut modifier pretty much removes a little bit of the distance from each strand, which is really good. So in this case, you can see here that we have a randomness from 0.0 to 0.2. Let's increase the top randomness to like a 2. Okay. And let's update there. Wait, we did have it right. Let's do that. There we go. It's freaking out a little bit. That's fine. So now we should be able to have certain hairs be longer than others. I think we can actually go way higher. So let's do like a 10. Let's hit this. So that's pretty much Maya freaking out and not knowing what exactly to do. There we go. So now we should have a little bit more variation about the different hairs. Like some hairs are gonna be really, really long, like this one right here, and others are gonna be shorter, as you can see over here. So maybe 10 is still a little bit too low. I'm not sure if my scale is way off. Maybe it is. Let me check real quick. Oh yeah, okay, so this is a gigantic hair, so that's why this is freaking out a little bit. So we're gonna need to use like very big numbers to get a proper result. So let's go for like a 40, and let's update this. Again, there we go. So that should give us a little bit more variation there on the tips. So make sure, in this case, it doesn't really matter that I'm working this high because this is something that's going to be baked onto a texture. However, for the purposes of the numbers and stuff, you might want to change that stuff a bit. I'm not sure if doing this will fix it. No. So see, even if we scale this down, we still need to scale the guides down. So I'm going to continue with this just for the sake of the video. So that's the cut modifier, which again gives us a very nice element here. And now I'm going to use one of the final modifiers, which is probably one of my favorites, and that is the noise modifier. So the noise modifier, as the name implies, adds noise to the hair, and that's going to break up the silhouette of the hair very, very nicely. And you can change the noise by using this frequency tab right here and the magnitude tab. The more frequency you have, the more noise you're going to get. Again, we're gonna have to have like very big numbers to get even more noise on our element. And the magnitudes also need to go way up. There we go, see that? So that's gonna give us a very freezy look to the hair, a very nice element look. Now, you can see that some of the strands are having a hard time trying to accommodate the proper noise. That's because we definitely need more divisions to properly manage this amount of noise. But if we go back to like what's the word? What was it? Frequency 10 and magnitude 10, look at that. That looks really, really good. Again, it's a little bit difficult to appreciate because of the thinness of these elements, but once we bake this into a texture, it's gonna look really, really nice. And that's it. You can go crazy with these modifiers, guys. Like you can actually go in here and change as many parameters as you want. And what I'm gonna be using, or what I'm gonna be doing, is I'm gonna be modifying this. I'm mostly gonna use this 3 to get all the different variations. So again, this is the main hair that we want, like the main element. I do think it's a little bit too thin still, so let's go to like a 0.07. And let's make this, there we go. I think that's a little bit better. And so we're gonna be using this element right here, and this is what we're gonna be baking. Now one last thing I wanna do before I close this video and continue doing all the different methods or the different cards, is I wanna mask a little bit of this, because as you can see, we have this border here and this border here that looks really fake-ish. And there's a way to minimize that. So I'm going to go up here into the masks for the density. I'm going to select my expression editor. No, sorry. So the little arrow here, I'm going to say create a map. I'm going to call this map, again, very important naming conventions. So this one is main hair, then masks, density mask. I'm going to say this is a black mask, create. So with a black mask, there's not going to be any hair whatsoever. I'm now going to go here into my paintbrush, change this to a white color, and definitely increase the radius here. And I'm going to paint the area where I want the hair to be. Should be something like this. Very important, save the mask, otherwise the hair won't appear again. And there we go. So now, with that done, we have our hair. This is going to be our first hair card. Now, if you think this is a little bit too wide for the amount of area that you want to cover, or if you think that this is way too much density, maybe a little bit of less density will be fine. Just play around with those parameters and try to find the perfect balance. So I think like a density of 4, but maybe with a little bit more thickness. Like, say like width 1 is way too much. See, it looks okay if you want to look like, I don't know, like a Medusa or something. In our case, a 0.7, 0.1. Yeah, 0.1 looks a little bit better. It's a little bit too thick, and again, I really like when I can see a little bit through the hairs. So I think a 0.08 is gonna be fine. And this is what you need to get. And for this, we need to do this 12 more times. So again, in the next video, I'm gonna show you the final result with all my cards. I'm gonna go over any of the ones that might be a little bit special, just so you know which modifiers and which elements I change. But the fact is that the process that I'm gonna be using for each of the other cards, it's exactly the same that the one that we did for this one, okay? So hang on tight, guys, and I'll see you back on the next video when we continue with our hair. Bye-bye.